Hi, it's Alison from Blue Cat Sewing. Today I'm going to show you how to make one of these. It's the large ID wallet. I do the horizontal version and the vertical version, both on the same pattern. I'm going to run you through how to make them. Ideal for keeping all your essentials in throughout the day. Just clip it to your lanyard. I'll pop the link just here, but here's the tutorial to take you through it. The first thing to do is to fuse the interfacing to the wrong side of the three main fabric pieces. And then take one of them and draw the rectangle onto the wrong side, onto the interface side of one of them. Then fold this in half, and then you'll be able to snip right into the corners. And then trim away some of the centre so that you're left with about 1 centimetre all the way round. Once you've done that, fold back the seam allowance onto the wrong side and press down each of the 4 sides. I try not to let the iron touch the interfacing because I'm never quite sure if it's going to affect the interfacing at all. And then get the PVC, the clear PVC, place that behind this window that you've created and pin the fabric in place. Be really careful not to get your pins onto the inner window. You don't want holes, pinholes on your window. And sew all the way around the window and trim away the clear PVC again to about 1 centimetre. And then trim away the left-hand side as indicated on the sewing pattern instructions and zigzag that narrow piece. Then turn it over and catching in the clear PVC that you've trimmed down, sew this seam down with a straight stitch. Now take this window and place it on top of one of the remaining main fabric pieces, lining up the edges on the right hand side and pin around the window. Again, being careful not to pin into the centre of the window. And then starting at the opening edge, we're going to stitch along all of these 3 sides. Don't forget to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end to secure your stitches. When you get to the corners, I always leave the needle in the fabric, like there, and then turn. You get a much neater corner. Now to trim away some of that bulk. Don't forget you're only going through 1 layer of fabric. Hang on to these bits that you're trimming away because they'll come in really handy when you're making your loop shortly. You might want to check that your card fits in there before you go any further. Place your zip right side down on the top edge of your front piece and then take one of the lining pieces and place that on top. Pin all of these layers together, making sure that the raw edges and the zip all line up at the top. I just use pins because I've done this a million times, but if you're not quite so confident, what you can do is pin it, but then also tack it or baste it in place so that you've got something to hold it really securely. And then we're going to use a zipper foot. Yours might look a little bit different to mine, but this is how I take mine off and put it on. And then stitch along this seam. Don't forget to do your back stitch at the beginning and the end. Now I've developed a little trick over the years because my lining fabric seems to move quite a bit. So I get one of my pins and I just ease it into place. If you've tacked it, you won't need to do this, but this is my way of getting around little puckers that appear. Because if you've got puckers, that's how your zip is going to get caught in the fabric and you don't want that. Open it out and press your lining down flat. Be really careful not to get the iron anywhere near the PVC. You'll see I've got a few threads here that I need to trim away. Then flip the lining onto the back and press it again. Do it with your fingers first and then use the tip of the iron. Again, you want to be really, really careful not to get anywhere near the clear PVC because it will melt. Now remember those pieces I said to save? Well, take one of them, cut a little strip, and taking your loop, you need to fold that in half lengthwise and place the interfaced strip against that crease line. And then basically all of those raw edges get folded in and in until you've got a strip that you can stitch down along one side. I like to put interfacing inside this loop because I think it just gives it a little bit of extra strength depending on what you've got inside your ID wallet. You might need it to be quite strong. Then trim down the loop because it's far too long as it is at the moment. And then place that folded loop along the top edge of your window piece and stitch that down quite close to the edge so that it gets enclosed into the seam allowance. Take the remaining lining piece and lay the zip down on top of it and the remaining main fabric piece and pin those all together. Again, you may want to tack this. Then stitch along using your zipper foot as before. It's a lot easier this time as you're sewing onto interfacing, which is really sturdy fabric. What we're doing here is we're making the vertical version of the ID holder. If you want to do the horizontal version, I will show you how to get to that point at the end of this because the loop goes in a different place. And do as you did before with the folding and the pressing, and then we need to close the zip about halfway. Then open everything out so that you've got the right sides of the main fabric and the right sides of the lining facing each other. Then pin the lining pieces together. This is where I usually start at the lining, just about 2 centimetres in from each side. This is going to be where you'll start stitching in a minute. And then we need to look at the zip area. You need to make sure that all your turnings are going in the same direction, so they're not different at one end of the zip from the other. So I have my linings going flat. You can see the white lining fabric goes up and the main fabric folds back on itself. At this open end of the zipper tape is flat. If you just have a go and follow this carefully, you should be able to see. It's a little bit complicated to put into words. Just make sure that when you turn it over like I did just then, make sure that the turning is going in the same direction on the front and on the back. And then pin all the way around. Be aware of where your window is so that you don't get any pin holes going into the window. If you find that yours isn't lying as flat as mine is, then just keep adjusting where you've put your pins and easing the fabric along. Start stitching where you put that first pin on the lining and then go all the way around. When you get to the zip, just slow down, take all your pins out at that point and go slowly over there. Try not to get a pucker. You can see where I placed the loop. We're going right over that point and the stitch line that I did, that's getting enclosed into the seam allowance so you won't see the stitching for the loop. In the past, I have also drawn a stitching line, which is helpful sometimes, but I'm just winging it here and going along. Take your pins out as you go and go slowly over the zip bits. You can sometimes get a little pucker at that point, so just take your time, lift up the machine foot as I did there, give it a little ease and you should be fine. Before you do anything else, just check front and back and make sure that you're happy that everything is enclosed, that all of your seams are going in the right direction, and if not, then unpick a little bit and restitch that point. Then trim off all of your corners and then trim, not too much, just a little bit around the edge. I definitely don't trim too much at where the zip is, because in the past when I've opened the zip, when I've been using my ID holder, there was one point where I just opened the zip and it came right off the zip tape at the end. So I always make sure that I've got a fair amount of zip tape at that end. Okay, now we're on to the exciting bit, turning it all the way through. So go through the gap that you've got in your lining and just push everything through. When you get to the zip, you can ease your fingers in and open up the zip a little bit more so that you've got more of a gap to turn everything through. Get as much of the corners out as you can with your fingers, and then we'll use something to get right into the corners. Now I've got this pair of scissors that is so blunt, I never use them as anything to cut with, but they're ideal for doing this. As you'll see, I can put my fingers right on the end and there's no way that I'm going to cut myself, let alone cut through some fabric. I have got a screwdriver that I use as well sometimes for poking out corners, but I think it's too sharp, to be honest, for doing this, so I don't really like using it. Maybe a bigger screwdriver would be okay, or you can get special tools for turning things through. Maybe you've got one of those. So once you're happy with your corners, we need to think about closing the gap. To do this neatly, pull the gap apart with your fingers so that the seam allowance goes on the inside. Give it a press. Place a pin there to hold it, and then you'll be ready to stitch. And press the whole thing on the wrong side. You don't want to be pressing on the right side where the clear PVC is. And then stitch along the gap to close it. Turn everything through, and we're just about there. The only thing we need to do now is to put a split keyring into the loop so that you can attach it to your lanyard. So that's the vertical version done. I hope you enjoyed making that. Keep following along with the video if you want to learn how to make the horizontal version of this, as there's just some slight differences in where to put the loop. But if not, I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give me a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Okay, so onto the horizontal version. Everything is the same as before until we get to the second part of the zip. When you get to your second lining piece, you need to know where the centre is so that you'll know where to put the loop. So pin all of those layers together just at that one end of the zip, lining up the edges, and then take your loop, fold it in half and find the centre. You're not going to put it onto the lining, you're going to put it onto the zip, but where that mark is. It's a bit fiddly, as you'll see, my loop keeps wanting to move, so I had to put it back again. But once you've got it there in place, put a pin right next to it. I don't put it on top because there's too much bulk there, but right next to it, and it seems to hold the loop where you want it to be. And then another pin at the other end. There you can see it's there, but it's not actually pinned down. And then stitch along there as you did before, removing the pins as you go. You probably need to go a little bit slower over the loop. And remember your reverse stitches at beginning and end to secure. And there you are, that's your loop in place. Now everything from here on is exactly the same as it is with doing the vertical version. Close the zip to just before where the loop is, and then turn everything so that the right sides of the main fabric and the right sides of the lining fabric are together, and then pin and stitch as you do on the vertical version. And that's it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Happy sewing!